A quiet black student faces daily microaggressions and exclusion at school. When the system fails her, her family fights back for justice and change. Amara Thompson hesitated for a moment before stepping into the grand brick building of Westbrook High. The morning sun cast long shadows across the cracked pavement, but inside, the halls buzzed with the noise of hundreds of students rushing to their classes. The air was thick with the scent of old textbooks, cafeteria food, and nervous energy. For Amara, this was supposed to be a fresh start, a chance to leave behind the isolation she'd felt for so long, to find a place where she could finally belong. She tightened her grip on the straps of her worn backpack, her heart beating faster. It was her first day at this new school, miles away from the neighborhood she'd grown up in. Westbrook High was overwhelmingly white, a fact that stood out starkly the moment she walked through those doors. The faces around her were different, the culture unfamiliar. She wasn't just a new student. She was a visible outsider. The whispers began almost immediately. Some were subtle, soft chuckles as she passed by, quick glances that darted away the moment their eyes met hers. Others were more blatant, words she could barely catch, but that stung all the same. "Look at her hair! So different," one girl whispered to her friend as Amara moved down the crowded corridor. The words felt like icy fingers tracing her spine. Amara tried to keep her head down, hoping to avoid drawing attention. But it wasn't easy. Her dark skin and tightly coiled hair set her apart in ways she'd never had to think about before. She was one of only a handful of black students in the entire school. It was a reality she had known coming in, but feeling it was something else entirely. Her first class was English, held in a room with tall windows and faded posters of classic novels. Ms. Carmichael, the teacher, greeted the students with a polite smile but barely acknowledged Amara's presence. When it came time to introduce themselves, Amara spoke quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. She shared a little about her love of reading and writing, hoping to connect. But her classmates barely listened. Some rolled their eyes, others muttered under their breath. It felt like the walls were closing in. Lunchtime was worse. The cafeteria was a cacophony of laughter and chatter, groups clustered around familiar tables. Amara carried her tray slowly, scanning for a place to sit. Every table seemed full. Every glance she received was laced with hesitation, or outright avoidance. Finally, she found a small, empty spot at the edge and sat down, feeling the weight of invisible walls pressing against her. She thought maybe things would get better, that over time, people would see beyond her skin. But the exclusion only deepened. In group projects, she was passed over, given the least interesting roles, or simply ignored. When she tried to speak up in class, her ideas were dismissed or overlooked. Her efforts to build friendships met with polite nods, but no invitations. The microaggressions started small, but grew steadily. "You're so articulate," a boy commented one day, as if it was a surprise that she spoke well. "Are you really from around here?" asked another, their tone skeptical. Questions about her real home, jokes about her hair, sideways comments about how different she was. These little cuts added up. One day, while walking to her locker, Amara felt a sharp sting on her shoulder. She turned to see a crumpled piece of paper fluttering to the floor. Picking it up, she unfolded it carefully. Written inside, in jagged letters, was a message that shattered her. "Go back where you came from." Her breath caught. Around her, the hallway seemed to blur. She looked up, searching for the culprit, but no one met her eyes. The silence was deafening. The incidents multiplied. Her locker was defaced with hateful graffiti. Someone smeared peanut butter on her textbooks. Something she'd heard was meant to be humiliating. During an art show, her paintings were scratched and torn. The few moments of joy she found in school were quickly overshadowed by the creeping dread that followed her everywhere. She told the school counselors, hoping for protection. But their responses ranged from vague promises to outright dismissal. High school drama, one said, as if her pain was trivial. Another suggested she might be overreacting. The principal assured her the school had policies in place, but Amara saw little evidence of action. Her parents were heartbroken. They listened as she recounted the daily struggles, the cold shoulders, the whispered insults, the fear that no one would stand up for her. They encouraged her to be strong, but they too felt powerless against a system that seemed indifferent. At night, Amara lay awake, the weight of isolation pressing down on her chest. She wondered if she would ever find a place to call home. The dreams she had brought with her to Westbrook High felt fragile and distant. But somewhere deep inside, a spark remained, a fierce determination not to be silenced or erased. She wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. She was fighting for every student who had been pushed to the margins, for every voice drowned out by ignorance and fear. This was her story to tell, and her battle to win. The silent bully was not just the students who taunted her. It was a system that looked away, that whispered that some voices were less important. But Amara was ready to break that silence. The weeks at Westbrook High stretched into months, and the weight of exclusion pressed heavier on Amara's shoulders. Every morning, she forced herself out of bed, trying to summon the courage to face another day filled with quiet battles. But the wounds of isolation and subtle hostility didn't heal. They festered beneath the surface. Her grades, once steady and promising, began to slip. It wasn't from lack of effort. Amara stayed up late, rereading lessons, practicing essays, and trying to prove her worth. But the emotional exhaustion drained her focus. It was hard to concentrate when her mind was clouded with anxiety and fear of the next whispered insult or sideways glance. Amara's teachers noticed. Some expressed concern in passing, but no one truly understood the full extent of what she was enduring. They saw the quiet girl with perfect attendance, but didn't see the loneliness that clung to her like a second skin. At home, the silence was thick too. Her parents worried deeply, but felt helpless. They wanted to shield her from the storm, but couldn't step inside the walls of a school that seemed determined to reject her. "You're stronger than they know," her mother said one night, squeezing her hand gently. "But you don't have to carry this alone." Amara nodded, grateful for their support, but the loneliness was a shadow that followed her everywhere. Then, one afternoon, everything changed. During lunch, as Amara sat quietly in her usual corner of the cafeteria, a group of students approached her table. Their faces were masks of smirks and barely concealed malice. She recognized them, the same ones who had whispered behind her back, who had ignored her in group work, who had laughed when she wasn't looking. "Hey, new girl," one of them sneered, dropping a half-eaten sandwich on her tray. "Why don't you go back to where you came from?" Amara's heart thundered in her chest. She looked up, eyes wide, and the room seemed to grow colder. The group closed in, their voices rising in cruel taunts and insults. They called her names, mocked her accent, made obscene gestures. The cafeteria, once noisy and bustling, grew eerily silent as other students watched, but said nothing. Some pulled out their phones, recording the scene instead of intervening. Amara's face burned with shame and anger, tears pricking her eyes. She wanted to run, to hide, to disappear. But something inside her snapped, a raw, fierce refusal to be broken. "I'm not going anywhere," she said, her voice trembling but resolute. "This is my school too." The jeers intensified, and one boy shoved her roughly. She stumbled but stayed standing. That moment was the turning point. The bullying was no longer subtle or silent. It was loud, public, and brutal. But when Amara sought help, the walls of indifference only grew higher. She reported the incident to the school administration, expecting action. Instead, she was met with cold, bureaucratic language. "We take these matters seriously," the vice principal assured her, "but we need evidence. Without witnesses willing to come forward, there's little we can do." Amara's pleas for safety were met with skepticism. "You have to understand, sometimes tensions run high," one counselor said, as if to minimize the violence she had faced. "Maybe try to avoid confrontation." The message was clear: endure quietly or face consequences. Her classmates' hostility didn't waver. If anything, it intensified, fueled by the school's failure to hold anyone accountable. Amara found herself navigating a minefield of daily threats and humiliation. At home, the pain was palpable. Her mother's eyes filled with tears when Amara described the shoves and insults. Her father's jaw clenched in frustration and helplessness. They encouraged her to be brave, to hold on to her dreams. But the emotional toll was crushing. Amara retreated into herself, struggling to maintain the image of strength she felt forced to project. The silence at school was deafening, but within her, a storm was brewing. A determination that this would not be her story's end. One evening, as she scrolled through social media, Amara discovered stories of others like her, students across the country facing similar battles against racism and bullying. Some had spoken out and sparked change. Some had found allies in unexpected places. Inspired, she began to write. Late at night, her fingers flew over the keyboard as she poured out her experiences, her fears, her hopes. Her words became a lifeline, a way to reclaim her voice. She shared her story anonymously at first, posting on forums and blogs dedicated to fighting racism in schools. The response was overwhelming. Messages of support flooded in from strangers who understood, who believed her, who had been through the same. Emboldened, Amara decided it was time to speak out, openly, fearlessly. But she knew the road ahead would be difficult. Standing up would make her a target. But she also knew silence was no longer an option. Her family rallied around her, offering strength and love. Her teachers, who had noticed her struggles quietly, offered help. And a small group of students reached out, expressing solidarity and a willingness to stand beside her. Together, they began to challenge the system that had allowed the bullying to fester. They organized meetings with school officials, demanded clear anti-bullying policies, and called for diversity training. They formed a coalition of students and parents committed to creating a safer, more inclusive environment. The journey was painful and slow. Change met resistance. But with each small victory, Amara's resolve grew. She wasn't just a silent victim anymore. She was a leader, a fighter, and a beacon of hope. The battle was far from over, but the tides were shifting, and Amara was ready to help lead the way. The days after the confrontation in the cafeteria marked a new chapter for Amara, one filled with both hope and harsh realities. The bullying, once cloaked in whispered insults and subtle exclusions, had now erupted openly, making it impossible for the school to ignore. Yet, as Amara quickly learned, acknowledgement did not equal justice. The coalition she helped spark gained momentum fast. A handful of students, many of them quietly observing the cruelty from afar, reached out in solidarity. They shared their own stories of exclusion, of feeling unseen and unheard. Together, they formed a small but fierce group, meeting after school in the library, plotting ways to change the culture at Westbrook High. Amara's family grew closer, united by a shared purpose. Her parents, though worried for her safety, became her strongest advocates, attending school board meetings and pushing for accountability. They demanded clear anti-bullying policies and transparent procedures for handling complaints, insisting the administration could no longer hide behind vague promises and empty platitudes. Despite these efforts, resistance surfaced quickly. Some students whispered that Amara was making a fuss and ruining the school's reputation. Others spread rumors, twisting her words and painting her as a troublemaker. The halls remained cold, And though a few teachers showed empathy, the system was slow to act. Amara's teachers were caught between official policies and the realities she faced. Some genuinely wanted to help, but felt constrained by administration directives or afraid of backlash. Others were indifferent, unwilling to disrupt the status quo. Her math teacher, Mrs. Larson, was a quiet ally, frequently checking in with Amara, offering encouragement and a safe space for her to express her feelings. But it wasn't just the students and staff who posed challenges. The school's leadership remained cautious, often sidestepping direct confrontation. The principal's office sent letters home, reminding parents of the importance of respect and kindness. But concrete actions remained elusive. The coalition began documenting everything: incidents of bullying, dismissive responses from staff, and patterns of neglect. They collected testimonies from students, parents, and even teachers willing to speak out. These accounts formed a growing dossier of evidence exposing the school's systemic failures. At home, the emotional toll weighed heavily on Amara. Nights were restless, filled with anxious dreams and the nagging question of what more she could do. Her parents tried to shield her from the worst of it, but the pain was undeniable. Her little brother, too young to understand the complexities, asked why kids were being mean to his sister. It broke Amara's heart to explain. One evening, during a late-night meeting with the coalition, Amara's voice faltered as she shared her fears. "Sometimes I wonder if it's worth it," she admitted quietly. "If things will ever change, or if I'm just fighting a losing battle." Her friend Marcus, a boy who had also faced exclusion for different reasons, reached out and squeezed her hand. "We're in this together," he said firmly. "Change is slow, but we're planting seeds. One day, those seeds will grow." Inspired by this hope, Amara pushed forward. She began writing op-eds for the local newspaper, sharing her experiences and calling for urgent reforms. Her articles sparked debate, with supporters praising her courage and detractors dismissing her as overly sensitive. But the conversation had begun, and silence was no longer an option. The school board convened a special hearing to address the rising concerns. Amara testified, her voice steady despite the nerves. She described the daily humiliation, the pain of invisibility, and the school's failure to protect her. Her words echoed through the auditorium, touching hearts and igniting new support. Parents, teachers, and students filled the room, many offering their own testimonies. Some apologized for turning a blind eye. Others pledged to be better allies. But opposition remained. A faction argued that the school was being unfairly targeted and that some complaints were exaggerated. After hours of heated debate, the board agreed to implement several new policies: mandatory anti-bullying training for staff and students, clearer reporting mechanisms, and the creation of a student-led diversity council. It was a start, a fragile victory, but one that gave Amara and her allies renewed strength. However, change was never linear. Backlash simmered beneath the surface. Some teachers resisted new curricula that included lessons on race and inclusion. Certain students doubled down on their hostility, feeling threatened by the shifting landscape. Anonymous threats against Amara and coalition members began to appear, chilling reminders that hate still lurked in the shadows. Amara refused to be silenced. With each challenge, her resolve hardened. She began speaking at community events and youth forums, inspiring others to stand up against injustice. Her story became a beacon, a reminder that even the quietest voices could rise into a powerful chorus. At school, small victories multiplied. The Diversity Council organized cultural events, open forums, and peer mentorship programs. Slowly, the halls that had once echoed with exclusion began to resonate with laughter, dialogue, and connection. Yet, Amara knew the work was far from over. The wounds ran deep, both in herself and in the community. But she had ignited a spark, and with it, the possibility of real transformation. As she looked ahead, Amara vowed to keep fighting, not just for herself, but for every student who deserved to feel seen, safe, and valued. The momentum that Amara and her coalition had built was undeniable. The small student group had blossomed into a campus-wide movement, and the community was beginning to take notice. But with visibility came new challenges, some expected, others far more insidious. The school's atmosphere was charged, a mix of cautious optimism and simmering tension. The Diversity Council, led by students like Amara and Marcus, had become a hub for change. They organized awareness campaigns, hosted guest speakers, and launched social media initiatives that reached beyond Westbrook High's walls. Their message was clear: no student should suffer in silence, and everyone deserved respect. Still, the path forward was anything but smooth. On one cold autumn morning, Amara found herself the target of an anonymous letter slipped into her locker. The words were sharp, hateful, and threatening, warnings to stop speaking out or face consequences. Her heart sank, but she refused to let fear dictate her actions. Instead, she shared the letter with her family and coalition members, turning a moment of intimidation into one of solidarity. Her parents contacted the school administration, demanding safety measures and support. The school responded by increasing security and implementing stricter policies against harassment. But the damage lingered. The threats were a chilling reminder of how deeply ingrained the resistance to change was. At home, the emotional burden weighed heavily. Amara's mother urged caution, fearing for her daughter's safety, while her father, a former community organizer, reminded her of the long history of struggles faced by those who dared to challenge injustice. "This fight," he said, "is bigger than us. It's about breaking cycles that have lasted generations." Amara's resolve deepened. Meanwhile, within the school, divisions became more visible. Some teachers embraced the new initiatives wholeheartedly, integrating lessons on cultural awareness and empathy into their classrooms. Others resisted, clinging to traditional curricula and quietly undermining the reforms. Faculty meetings grew contentious, with debates about the right approach to education often turning personal. Amara's math teacher, Mrs. Larson, became an unexpected ally. She offered tutoring sessions for students struggling academically and emotionally, creating a safe space where stories could be shared and healing could begin. Her support was a lifeline for Amara amid the turbulence. But not everyone was so supportive. During a school assembly focused on diversity and inclusion, a group of students disrupted the event with jeers and boos. The incident was recorded and quickly spread across social media, igniting fierce debates within the community. Some defended the dissenters as exercising free speech, while others condemned the blatant disrespect. The administration's response was cautious, emphasizing the importance of dialogue and understanding, but stopping short of disciplinary action. This hesitancy frustrated Amara and her peers, who saw it as a tacit endorsement of intolerance. Undeterred, Amara doubled down on her efforts. She began collaborating with local advocacy groups and civil rights organizations, learning how to navigate systems of power and influence. Workshops on activism, public speaking, and legal rights became part of her weekly routine. She discovered a wellspring of strength in the stories of those who had come before her, fighters who had faced similar battles and prevailed. Her activism extended beyond the school. She spoke at community centers, town halls, and youth conferences, sharing her experiences and encouraging others to raise their voices. Each speech was a step toward dismantling the walls of silence and denial that had long protected prejudice. Yet, progress was met with backlash. One night, as she returned home from a meeting, Amara noticed her family's car had been vandalized. Windows shattered, hateful graffiti scrawled across the doors. The police investigated, but no arrests were made. The incident rattled her family, but also galvanized their commitment. The local media picked up the story, drawing wider attention to the escalating conflict at Westbrook High. Journalists interviewed students, parents, and educators, painting a complex picture of a community at a crossroads. Some articles praised the courage of Amara and her coalition, while others questioned the wisdom of pushing change so rapidly. In the midst of this turmoil, Amara's academic performance began to suffer. The constant stress, coupled with the emotional weight of her activism, took a toll. Her grades slipped, and fatigue settled in. Yet, she refused to quit. One afternoon, Mrs. Larson found Amara quietly reading in the library. Sitting beside her, she said gently, "Amara, you don't have to carry this alone. Let us help you. We believe in you." That simple act of kindness rekindled Amara's spirit. The turning point came during a community forum organized to address the ongoing issues at the school. Hundreds of residents filled the auditorium: students, parents, teachers, and local officials. The air buzzed with anticipation and tension. Amara took the stage, her voice steady despite the nerves. She recounted her journey: the isolation, the bullying, the fight for recognition and justice. She spoke of the pain, but also of hope, urging the community to confront its biases and work together for change. Her words resonated deeply. Several community leaders stood to express support, pledging resources and policy changes. Parents who had once been silent now voiced their concerns and commitments. For the first time, a real dialogue was opening. Yet, the path ahead remained uncertain. The forum ended with promises, not guarantees, and the struggle to transform words into action was just beginning. Back at school, Amara felt a cautious optimism. Small changes began to take root: a new peer mentorship program, staff training on cultural competency, and increased student engagement in decision-making. The coalition continued to grow, welcoming new voices and ideas. Amara's journey was far from over, but she had become a beacon, a symbol of resilience and the power of standing up in the face of adversity. Through the noise, the fear, and the setbacks, her quiet strength was shaping a new narrative for Westbrook High, one where every student's voice mattered, and where silence no longer shielded injustice. The changes at Westbrook High were beginning to ripple beyond the school walls. The community was waking up to the realities many had ignored for years, and the conversations that had once been whispered in hallways were now taking place openly in living rooms, churches, and public spaces. But change, especially when long overdue, often comes with resistance. Amara could feel it in the way some students avoided her gaze, the cold stares from a few teachers who had once ignored her, and the hushed murmurs that still followed her through the corridors. The struggle for acceptance was far from over. One morning, a notice was posted on the school bulletin board announcing a new district-wide policy to combat bullying and discrimination. It included mandatory training sessions for staff and students, the formation of a task force to review incidents, and clear channels for reporting and addressing grievances. For Amara and her coalition, it was a victory, proof that their voices had made a difference. They celebrated quietly, but knew their work had just begun. However, some parents and community members voiced strong opposition. At a packed school board meeting, a group stood firmly against the reforms, claiming they threatened traditional values and unfairly targeted certain groups. The debate was heated, emotions running high on both sides. Amara attended the meeting, her heart pounding as she prepared to speak. When her turn came, she stood tall and clear-headed, recounting her experiences and pleading for empathy and change. "This isn't about dividing us," she said. "It's about making sure every student feels safe and valued. It's about justice. Our school, and our community, can only grow stronger when we confront the truth." Her words echoed through the room, moving some, but provoking anger in others. The vote passed, but narrowly, revealing the fractures still present in the community. Back at school, the atmosphere was tense. Some students felt emboldened, speaking up and supporting the coalition's efforts. Others grew defensive, resistant to the changes disrupting the status quo. Amara's group organized workshops and peer-led discussions to bridge divides, encouraging empathy and understanding. They invited local leaders, counselors, and activists to facilitate conversations about race, privilege, and bullying. One such session opened with a story from a white student who admitted to having been part of the problem, unknowingly perpetuating harmful stereotypes and exclusion. The courage of her confession sparked honest dialogue and softened hardened attitudes. These small victories, though incremental, began to chip away at the walls of prejudice. Yet, Amara remained vigilant. The scars left by years of silence and neglect were deep, and setbacks were inevitable. One afternoon, a social media post accusing Amara and her friends of creating drama went viral among students. Rumors spread quickly, sowing distrust and tension. Several coalition members received anonymous messages filled with hate and threats. The school administration condemned the harassment publicly, increasing support for victims and emphasizing respect and accountability. Still, the emotional toll was heavy. Amara confided in Mrs. Larson, who reminded her of the power in their resilience. "You're not just fighting for yourself," she said. "You're lighting a path for others to follow." That encouragement gave Amara renewed strength. Outside of school, the movement began to inspire other schools in the district. Students and educators reached out to Amara, seeking advice and solidarity. A regional youth forum was planned, where young activists could share their stories and strategies. The night before the event, Amara sat quietly in her room, reflecting on how far she had come, from a silent target of bullying to a leading voice for justice. Her phone buzzed, a message from Marcus. "Ready to change the world tomorrow?" She smiled, typing back, "More ready than ever." The forum was a powerful gathering. Voices from different backgrounds united in their call for equity and respect. Amara's speech was met with applause and heartfelt conversations. The momentum was building. But with progress came difficult conversations about privilege, systemic bias, and the work still needed to dismantle deep-rooted inequities. Amara realized the fight was ongoing, but she no longer felt alone. She had a community behind her, friends, family, teachers, and allies, standing together. Westbrook High was changing, slowly, but surely, and so was Amara. She was no longer just the silent bully's target. She was a leader, a catalyst for transformation, and a beacon of hope for those still finding their voice. The months that followed brought quiet but meaningful change. The new policies at Westbrook High weren't a magic fix. There were still moments of tension, setbacks, and resistance. But Amara saw something she hadn't felt in a long time: hope. Students who once ignored her began nodding in recognition, some even approaching to apologize or thank her for speaking out. Teachers who had turned a blind eye were now participating in training sessions, asking questions, and trying to learn. The coalition she helped build continued to grow, welcoming new members who were ready to stand against injustice. Together, they organized events, created safe spaces, and made sure no voice went unheard. One day, as Amara walked through the halls, she passed a bulletin board filled with photos and stories from their activism, a visual reminder of how far they had come. The school wasn't perfect, but it was changing. Her family noticed the difference too. Her parents smiled with pride when she spoke at community gatherings. Her friends called her a hero, but she knew this was bigger than any one person. It was about justice, dignity, and the power of speaking up. Looking back, Amara understood that the silent bullying she endured wasn't just about cruelty. It was a symptom of a deeper problem. But it also revealed the strength and resilience in those who refused to be silenced. The journey had been painful, but it forged her into a leader. As graduation approached, Amara stood on the stage delivering her speech. Her voice was steady and clear, filled with passion and purpose. "We have the power to change our world," she said, "not by ignoring the darkness, but by shining a light on it. Together, we can build a future where every student is seen, heard, and valued." The crowd erupted in applause. For Amara, this was just the beginning. She knew the road ahead would still have challenges, but now she was ready, armed with courage, community, and an unbreakable spirit. The silent bully was no more. Her voice had become a roar,